Following up my previous video where I analysed a new Paper Mario questionnaire, I wanted to spend a little bit more time thinking about a major reason that has perhaps been discounted for why Nintendo may be choosing now to reevaluate their approach to Paper Mario. And first of all, let's be clear, I think they are very consciously re-evaluating the approach they're taking to this series of games. Kensuke Tanabe's comments that since Sticker Star it's no longer possible to modify Mario characters or to create original characters that touch on the Mario universe now seem to be in the rearview mirror, as they are specifically surveying the popularity of original characters and asking multiple questions in multiple surveys about them. To be fair, even the creative team seem to have chafed against this restriction in the past. Back in the Origami King, they did create original bosses, it's just that, as Tanabe-san said, they had to be outside the Mario universe. He explained, this means that if we aren't using Mario characters as bosses, we need to create original characters with designs that don't involve the Mario universe at all, like we've done with Ollie and the stationary bosses. So you can't create a Hooktail or Lord Crump, so instead they go with a Stapler as a boss. This points to one possible reason why Nintendo may want to check in with their audience as to the reception of their original characters, and that's simply developer fatigue. I can't imagine it's fun if you're a creative person labouring under restrictions that go to the heart of your creativity, but of course this chimes with the gist of fan feedback over the years, which has become ever more vocal, especially with Arlo's apparently very successful campaign to remaster the Thousand Year Door. But while there may be other reasons for this change, people point for example to the current hibernation of the Mario and Luigi series as one reason they might want to tack Mario back to traditional RPGs through the Paper Mario series, I'm starting to suspect that there may be a much more significant reason for this, and that reason will be the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Let's look at it this way. The first film was able to capitalize on the existing and huge Mario universe, but mainly focused in on a few characters. Even then, the narrative demands of a movie are vastly different from a video game, and especially most Mario games, which aren't narratively driven at all. For a second film, and possibly in due course a third and a fourth, you need to have strong characters being added to the lineup. Now, I'm sure the good folks at Illumination would be happy to create their own, but this I suspect would be anathema to Nintendo. For one thing, there's not much harmony between the films and the games if the films have a completely different cast, and they are missing a golden opportunity to sell games off the back of the films. For another, we know that Nintendo makes sure they keep a tight hold on a lot of the designs. Their Nintendo Pictures company is advertising even now for 3D character designers. Now sure, Nintendo Pictures do a lot besides cinema ventures such as the Super Mario movie, and they work on CG elements including in games going back to Metroid Other M, and Nintendo Pictures have quite a few credits on the Super Mario RPG. In a future video I will be deep diving Nintendo Pictures in a little more detail, as it's an interesting part of Nintendo's business. Nevertheless, it strikes me that Nintendo would want to have a finger on the pulse of the characters being created and not outsource them to Illumination, however much they might respect the company as partners. They also have the issue to face that not all of the characters in the games can be ported into a film version exactly as is. All of the Mario cast have received some level of tweaking and adaptation, if only in their looks, but perhaps the most evident example of a change being made is with Princess Peach. The Mario universe is not flush with female role characters. There's Princess Peach, Princess Daisy, Princess Rosalina, Mayor Pauline, I mean, you get the picture. Years of following a simple story formula with Shigeru Miyamoto warning Yoshiaki Koizumi off for getting too bogged down in story after Super Mario Galaxy had left the Mario character roster a little underdeveloped. Now, Nintendo could try and come up with a whole new cast to populate the background of its films, or it could go and trawl a ready-made source of characters and narrative. In fact, they could go for its most successful and iconic narratives, Super Mario RPG and Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door. Now, Super Mario RPG is not of tremendously great use to Nintendo here, as Geno, at least, and as far as I can tell, Mallow and other original characters to that game as well, are owned by Square Enix, and while relations between Nintendo and Square Enix are good, indeed Nintendo owns a stake in Square Enix, the legal and logistical wrangling around putting someone else's character into a Nintendo movie means the juice would certainly not be worth the squeeze. But what about the Paper Mario crew? Here's where things get even more complicated, as although the games were developed under Nintendo, the specific creators are Intelligent Systems. Where does the copyright for these characters actually lie? I haven't been able to determine this precisely, but my hunch is that the ownership would at least be shared. Nintendo has a long and close relationship with Intelligent Systems and shared copyright on Fire Emblem characters. I don't necessarily think 20 years ago they had the same long-term view they might have now of intellectual property rights, and in any event they have always looked to foster close relationships with their development partners rather than just taking them over outright. Still, Intelligent Systems is so close to Nintendo that they are literally down the street, and since it was started with ex-Nintendo employees, and 98% of its titles are Nintendo titles anyway, the legal and logistical barriers to using these characters must be low, and Nintendo always has the option just to buy the company out if it makes life easier, which they would obviously struggle to do with a major corporation like Square Enix. One curious wrinkle is that the new title screen of the game contains some oddly specific wording about the copyright. Whereas the original title said that the copyright was held by Nintendo, but the game was developed by Intelligent Systems, the new title screen additionally says that the program is the copyright of Nintendo and Intelligent Systems together. Program, that's a very specific term. Other remakes, such as the recent Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp, don't make this differentiation. Is this to differentiate the programming of the game from the characters and intellectual property within the game? It's impossible to say for sure, but I'd be interested if anyone has any other examples of the rights being demarcated this way in the title screen or in any other credits. All this considered, could we see a Paper Mario character or group of characters showing up in future film? Well, just looking at the female characters, you have some incredible diversity with Hooktail, Madame Flurry, Goombella, Jolene, Beldam, and Mouse. I'm leaving aside Vivian for a moment, as this may be a controversy too far for the company at present, but still, a movie poster can't just feature Bowser all over again. You need to bring something new in order to hook people back. Hooktail to me has the kind of iconic appearance that is Mario-ish but also distinctive. You also need locations that would generate stories, and Rogueport to me is a fantastic example of a location different from anything we've seen in the Super Mario movie, but that would naturally generate lots and lots of different storytelling opportunities. This also means that Nintendo don't need to go to the trouble of generating a whole lot of new characters themselves when they could just raid their back catalogue. Now let's just pull back on the reins a little. The second film is in development, but I don't necessarily think they urgently need a new infusion of character just yet, and there are plenty of lower hanging fruits in Princess Peach's Garden, Rosalina being the most obvious perhaps. Plus, films don't just drop from the sky, they take a long time to develop, and you can bet that the character and scenario for the second Mario movie has been locked down for a long time, probably well over a year. But Nintendo thinks long term, and long term they will need new characters. At the very least, they will want the people developing future stories of Mario games to know the best received examples of prior Mario stories, and so re-releasing games like Super Mario RPG and the Thousand Year Door at least puts in the front of people's minds what Mario storytelling can do. And going forward, they will either have to reuse the stories they have and the characters they have, or they'll have to come up with new ones toot sweet. And this is clearly the direction of questioning they're exploring in their recent surveys. They specifically asked about whether people prefer characters that are adaptations of existing models, Toadsworth, Captain Toad and Toadette, all being variants of the Toad character, or original different characters like Lord Crump and Madame Flurry, their examples. Now this might be important for a Paper Mario game, but imagine the potential significance of getting this right or getting this wrong for a new movie. It's also possible that they want to use the Thousand Year Door as a testbed for original characters, or perhaps to use a follow-up game for the same reason. Think about it. If a second film launches as scheduled in 2026, and they keep to their 3-yearly film schedule, then a third Mario movie would be expected to come in 2029. The next Paper Mario, well, if they follow their 4-yearly schedule, that would be in 2028. It's conceivable to me that they could use the next Intelligent Systems Mario RPG as a launchpad for a game with a new cast. Then they can market the game off the hype of the forthcoming film, and in exchange the game becomes a piece of long-term warm-up marketing for the next film. The game could debut all sorts of new characters who could soon become significant through the third Mario movie. They might decide to bring back old characters from previous Paper Mario games if they're successful. There's no reason why they couldn't do a direct sequel to the Thousand Year Door if this game is especially successful, and in case they can refine and develop the characters who've proved successful this time out into something that is a little better suited for film adaptation. Or they might decide to start from scratch and come up with an original cast that could work on film as well. Nevertheless, I think some level of synchronicity between the films and the Mario RPGs going forward seems like a very obvious strategy for Nintendo. In fact, on their most recent survey, the very first question they asked about characters was whether the Super Mario Bros. Movie made survey respondents curious to play a game with characters from the Mario franchise. Is this why Nintendo has decided to zone in on the famously story-rich The Thousand Year Door right now? I mean, I'm not saying it's the only reason, and of course the film was in development as far back as when the Origami King was being prepped for launch, but I definitely think that the conversations around Mario's narrative potential and his deep bench, or lack thereof, of marketable characters has changed significantly since the Origami King tried to get us excited about Ollie, a character who literally wouldn't make any sense outside of the Paper Mario universe because he is completely tied up in the paper aesthetic. If I were to put this all to a forecast, I'd say there's a 10% chance that the next Mario film contains a Paper Mario original character in a speaking role. It's certainly possible since the original film even had Pikmin references that we'll see some kind of deeper cut Mario references as well, so I'd put at 50% the chance of any kind of Paper Mario acknowledgement, whether it's a post in the background or Koops in a crowd scene. Going forward though, I do think the odds of Paper Mario intersecting with the movies will only increase. One sticky issue they do face though, Paper Mario is subtly different from regular Mario. This was never a problem for them in the games, and of course the film aesthetic is already subtly different from the game aesthetic. Nevertheless, I do wonder whether there will be a slightly greater push to try and do a Mario RPG, probably still from Intelligent Systems, that presents the characters more traditionally if they're positioning it to have a crossover appeal with the films. Or of course they could go the other direction and make a fully fledged Paper Mario animation. At first I thought this was mad, but then I realised the paper aesthetic has to be significantly cheaper to animate than your standard animated feature. Now I don't think this would suit a big budget cinema film, but look at the way Sega has spun Knuckles off into a television miniseries to prepare the way for the third Sonic film. Can you imagine a Paper Mario miniseries between films? I think in the next 5 years the odds are low, about 10% of Paper Mario becoming a film or television franchise in its own right, but the further forward we look, the deeper Nintendo will have to trawl to find material, and I think Paper Mario could be very enticing to them as a way to expand the footprint of their popular Mario series of film. Of course, key to this is the role of the Paper Mario developers Intelligent Systems, and so I really recommend checking this video out where I deep dive the stalwart developers in a little more detail. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.